Hey, welcome everybody. And thank you for joining me on this IBM Developer Twitch live stream. Today, we're going to talk about what you can do to wrap up and submit your call for code application. So key to what you build for the competition is also the attendance information that the judges use to assess your code. So you're going to want to include some good material that supports it, documents it, and demonstrates it. So I'll go through some of those best practices based on some of the successful teams from last year, as well as what we've seen in the IBM internal competition that's been pretty well received. So let's get started. So call for code, it's wrapping up. The deadline is on Monday at midnight Pacific time. So you've got the weekend to wrap up everything, get your demo video recorded if you haven't already, get your documentation together and things like that. And of course, you can get your submission in earlier if you want, and then just update, for example, the GitHub repository that it refers to, or if you want to change anything about the core description, just keep resubmitting, and we'll just grab the latest submission from your email address and use that as your final entry. Okay, so I'll get into more of those details later, but for now, so call for code, the reason for it being and the reason we're doing it and the type of applications we want to receive, let me go through a bit of that. So natural disasters are very important to individual communities, companies around the world. It affects, obviously, families, individuals, and for organizations, their employees, where they do business with their customers. So it affects everybody around the world, every age. And some of the natural disasters are very similar. So solutions built, for example, for hurricanes in Puerto Rico can be reused, ideally, for solutions that handle cyclones in Africa or typhoons in the Philippines. So these natural disasters are growing daily. It seems there's always news about a new thing that's happened, an earthquake in Seattle, weather and Category 1 hurricanes in New Orleans, even just the last few weeks. And of course, the heat wave, for example, in Europe that's going on right now. So these things are growing. But fortunately, the world's developers, the number of developers, people with skills, technical skills, developers, project managers, designers, business analysts, these folks are also growing, however. So what Call for Code is at its core trying to do is match up that community of developers against those growing problems and do that through solutions they enter in the Call for Code competition. So the specific scope is we're looking for applications, long-term, sustainable, high-quality applications that can help improve long-term preparation for disasters, short-term preparation, real-time response, and helping folks get on their feet later to build back faster later. So it's not just about building applications that do something really dramatic right during the storm. We want to make sure we see some applications that help people make decisions long before disaster strikes. So consider that and make it very clear in your submission what you're trying to build, why you're doing that, and perhaps how prevention can make a greater impact than response with what you're building. So there's a couple of potential solution ideas here. I hope by this point you have a pretty clear idea of what you've been building. But whatever you have been building, you want to make sure it's put in the context of those real world problems. And some of those could include alerting pharmacies about increasing their stocks, making sure that they have materials where they need to be beforehand, using information analytics to understand disaster risk, and using that to inform people to make decisions long before they move to an area or build a structure somewhere. Using visual recognition to capture damage and get some claims processed by insurance companies faster, or prioritize help that they need. And then making sure, for example, you can improve making sure that supply chains are resilient to disasters, making sure donations after the fact get to where they belong, can be tracked along the whole way. So those are some particular solution ideas. Again, I really encourage when you write up your submission description that you really call out the real world problem that you identified through your research and clearly phrase how your application is going to make a difference, and definitely not add complexity to a potential solution, which we definitely don't want to do. Okay, so Project Owl, you may be familiar with them already. They were last year's winner, and their solution was a combined IoT solution that built a mesh network to provide just enough connectivity to get from 0% to 1%, basically, enough that small messages can be emitted over the network through a captive wireless portal, so there was no software installed on the device, be a laptop, be it a phone, and then map those needs on a dashboard. So they combined a bunch of IBM cloud services to do this, including the IoT platform, weather company data, and of course, the web application runtimes to host the application. So that's what they built last year as a hybrid solution. You can focus on software, hardware, whatever you want to do. And developers from around the world created some really amazing stuff. Analytics, research, web applications, mobile application, really interesting stuff. So if you have a chance, go check out that documentary video about Project Owl. You'll learn about their solution, and you'll learn how they were able to then take what they built, get some help from IBM through the Code and Response program to improve it and help them test it in Puerto Rico. So they have now moved on, that was 4 months ago, to do several more tests, and we'll continue to do that through this year. So whatever you build for Call for Code, keep in mind that we want to be able to deploy those applications with you around the world if you're the winner. And we want those things to have the support to be improved and grow communities around them. So what you submit doesn't necessarily need to be a full production ready thing at the start. What it should show is basically some potential that the judges can see, and where it's clear that it could be aided by building a community around it, providing the IBM Corporate Service Corps to go help deploy it. And I'll get into a bit of that too. Project Owl had a really good roadmap, and I'll show it to you. Maybe it'll influence how you phrase whatever you submit as well. So again, there's also a 20-minute documentary about that deployment. Go check it out. It's very exciting and very inspiring. So the other teams too, the runners-up last year had really cool applications. You can learn more about them as well on the callforcode.org site under /projects. So they came from around the world. Some used Node-RED, which is a nice workflow tool for linking services together, particularly getting IoT information. There was another set of applications that use Watson Studio and some of the machine learning tools within there to create custom models that could be used by a visual recognition program, so that they can make decisions based on what they train the model to do. And others used your standard web runtimes, your standard databases, combined with new cloud services like blockchain and the artificial intelligence to create a full solution. So again, you've got access to a whole bunch of IBM services to use. You don't have to focus on using just IBM services. For example, you can integrate APIs or SDKs that exist on your mobile phone already, such as CoreML, if you have an iOS device, or you can rely on Google Maps to do some of your mapping, or you can rely on external APIs, external data sources. Just call those things out in your submission, so it's clear to the judge what's your code, what your dependencies are, and make sure you're using at least one IBM cloud service or system. If you're running, for example, on a mainframe, we're still looking for those applications too. So, so take a look at some of these, get some inspiration. There's videos, there's descriptions of them as well. And I'll get to what made their submissions really stand out a little bit later in the presentation here. So call for code, what you would win. So why would you even want to submit? So there's lots of great prizes, just like there were last year. We have, again, a $200,000 cash prize. There's an invitation to the Call for Code Global Award announcement where you'll be given the prize if you're the top winner. You've got support from the Linux Foundation to create the structure, community, and marketing around your solution. So that includes setting up an LLC, for example, so you have legal protection of your organization. You've got access to microfunding through them as well, and they will help you create the best open source best practices around your code repository to encourage community people to participate. And they can help drive awareness of it as well. You also have an opportunity for mentorship and investment potentially from other partners that IBM connects you with. And you'll have a chance, just like Owl did earlier this year, to be matched with a team that can help take your application and deploy it somewhere in the world where it's going to make a difference. And ideally, that deployment also gives it enough boost to really keep it a self-sustaining system, led by your team, of course, who owns the IP and has the ultimate decision about what it's going to be doing and where it's going to be deployed. It's all your code, but we want to make sure we can help you get the most out of it. Again, there's 4 other runners up again this year. The second and third place winners get $25,000. Fourth and fifth each gets $10,000 per team. Again, really great prize structure. And on top of that, this year, we are going to be doing highlights of the top submissions, the finalists at TechCrunch Disrupt in San Francisco. So it'll be a chance to show off what you built, get access, of course, to the communities there, and hopefully you'll go from there and do well in the announcement very shortly after that at the Call for Code Global Awards at the United Nations in New York this year. Okay, so let's, I'm gonna just do this one more slide before I hop over to a bit of demo about what makes a solution great. So the rules, well, the judging criteria are again the same as last year. We are looking for applications that score very well across all categories. But we know that, there have been some that had success last year that did really good in one of these categories. And that's really what drove them forward as semifinalists or finalists. So number one, as I said, we're looking for real code, working code, not just ideas. So the more complete your application is, the better. There's no real objective answer to how much needs to be done. Keep in mind that that's all relative to who else is submitting for the competition. So my rule of thumb is make it, implement as much as you can, document that very well, make it very high quality, make it clear to the judges what it can do, what its capabilities are, and use your roadmap to describe any future plans you have, things, gaps you need to fill. For example, if you had access to money, if you had access to experts from IBM, things like that. And even though you might be building an application that seems localized to what you're doing, for example, if you're addressing floods in India, think about how whatever you built can go beyond the context of India and be applied elsewhere in the world, be it in Southern Africa, be it in the Caribbean. Try to phrase your solution as something that is not only effective to one specific locale. Make it global, make it have a reach. Second criteria, again, this goes towards how you'll describe your application, the problem you're solving and why it matters, and then how your application solves that problem, and any sort of metrics you can put in there for explaining how much better of a job it does than something else that already exists. All that's going to be very important to make sure that the judges know that what you built has a target market or a target niche where it's going to be very effective and won't just replicate something that's already in commercial use, perhaps by first responders, and instead either complements that or improves on that in some way. Okay, and the third criteria is design and usability. So what you built, ideally you can phrase as part of your documentation the target end user that you have for your system. So that may be a victim of a natural disaster, that may be a citizen preparing for a natural disaster, that might be a local government authority or a small company, a large enterprise creating a business continuity plan in case of a disaster. So think about that end user and try to frame why this technology is going to help them solve their problem, get from where they would currently be to where they need to be, or to improve their life somehow, improve their health and well-being, and make sure that it's something that that person that you identified can easily use, easily understand. And is it something, for example, that they'll have to download during a crisis? They're probably not going to want to do that. Or is it something that can leverage existing social networks, for example, that are on a mobile device? Think about how it integrates with what they already use. Project Owl, I think one of the great reasons that they were successful with their user interface is that instead of creating a mobile app or even a web application that's accessible from a mobile browser, what they took advantage of was the pop-up window that comes on your mobile device, your computer, when you join a public Wi-Fi network. They're called captive portals. So what happens is that's just built into the phone operating system. It provides a way for a developer to provide some rich text to display a user interface in there. And normally it's like a login screen. Do you accept the terms of joining this Wi-Fi network? But what OWL did was repurpose that to use actually as an input form to send data over. So think about how the user is going to install, consume, buy, or otherwise subscribe to your solution, whatever you plan for it to be manifested as. And finally, creativity and innovation. So we realize that there's a lot of great ideas out there that want to cover a lot of great new ground, but they're kind of framing that problem and may not have exactly enough time to create an application that can effectively demonstrate the usage in that feature. So the example I like to give is that last year, we saw in the internal IBM competition, someone had come up with a really cool idea. They had looked at the tsunami in Sri Lanka and realized that while there was a lot of loss of life in 2004, not only in Sri Lanka, but around the Indian Ocean, there was a lot of human loss, but large animals at one of the national parks were not affected really much at all. And what they tried to figure out is, what did these animals know that humans didn't know about warning for this tsunami? And they weren't able to pinpoint it, but what they could do was harness it. So what they thought about doing was looking at data that may be already available about those animals in the national park, such as a tracking collar, link that up to coordinates of where that animal is, and link that to where that animal is going at the moment. And if they were able to use an algorithm that sorted out that all the animals are moving on topology upland, that may be a warning sign that humans should use to start preparing. So obviously they couldn't implement a full solution like that, but what they did was describe it very well, document it, explain how they would use the information, where they would get it, and they had a set of code that could consume it. So it wasn't fully working integrated, but it was super creative. They had the right framework for it. It just wasn't completed. So it scored very well on creativity, not so well on completeness, but it's still, its average score was better than many. So think about those sort of things as well. Okay, so let me just hop over to the challenge site. So all of these details on the rules, the scope, they are on the callforcode.org site. So just a point of clarification, callforcode.org is the global initiative that involves the United Nations, the American Red Cross, IBM as a founding partner, and many other organizations that you can see under the ecosystem here, as well as celebrity supporters and the judges involved in the competition, and the organizations that they represent. So that's a .org site. It's where the official rules are. It's where the submission platform is. And the IBM site is where you're going to find the tools to build applications to compete in the competition. So if you go to callforcode.org, there is a menu bar up top called Submit. It used to be called Accept. This will land you on the challenge page. And here you'll find the links you need. If you don't already have your IBM Cloud account, if you've been working locally, for example, on your solution, that gets you connected with your Cloud Lite account, which gives you access to a bunch of free services, additional credit if you want to upgrade, and a community of people that can help either join your team or be somebody that you can refer to, such as an IBM mentor, to help you with questions that you might have. You've also got a link there to the submission form itself. But this is your one stop before you submit. Make sure you look over the challenge scope, look over the information on the schedule, look over the technologies that you can take advantage of, and look at the official rules and judging criteria. All that information is available on the challenge page on callforcode.org. And the submission form itself is at callforcode.org/submit, linked from the challenge page. And here you can see the actual form that describes the sort of things that you'll need to submit along with your code. So just to take you through that, there's a few short questions in here. So you pull up the submission form, And only your team lead needs to fill out the main submission form. Each other additional person on your team of up to 5 total people, just your teammates, they'll have to fill out just an acceptance of the participation agreement. That includes a code of conduct with the communities. That includes the full details on the prize structure, your IP that you own, the Apache 2 licensing that you'll be required to do if you win a prize, if you accept the prize. All those details are covered in the participation agreement. So everybody's got to sign that, but only the team lead needs to fill out the actual submission form. So you'll need to gather up a set of materials. There's a list here on the submission page. I'll also take you through the fields, give you some examples. But in short, you'll need your submission name your project or your team, a short description of it, what's its one-liner of what it aims to do, a long description, which is about a page of text in Microsoft Word or some other text editor you may use. This isn't a hard limit of 500 words. It's just a guideline. And keep in mind that even if you submit something here, you can also include that information or more information in your source code repository. That you'll link to later. You'll need to include your solution roadmap. This can work very well in terms of phrasing how mature your solution is. And you'll also then include your link to the GitHub repository. Again, this is a place where you can put a whole bunch of other documentation that won't fit in the form, including extended roadmap if your upload is bigger than 10 megabytes. You'll include your 3-minute demo video, which is what the judges will use primarily to assess your solution. And because we have a lot of folks that are from non-technical, but they are from the domain of natural disasters, they may not have the technical experience to go look at your actual source code repository. So these are the final round judges. We've got a bunch of other judges that are also going to be assessing solutions before it even gets to the final round judges. So the technical, there'll be some technical judging, and then these folks here will eventually see the same materials, and the video will be very important for getting your idea across to them. So you want to do that video. You can add another video if you need to. So like greater than 3 minutes, feel free to add like a longer cut if you need to. There's no guarantee the judge is going to check it out, but if you don't feel comfortable totally cutting down your video to 3 minutes, it's just an additional place to put another version of it. Then it's got to be public or provide the password so that judges can actually get to it. An unlisted YouTube video is probably the best recommendation if you don't want anybody to necessarily see it during the judging rounds. But that's up to you. As long as the judges can access it, you don't have their names, so there's not a specific set of IDs you can whitelist. List your one or more IBM cloud services used. It could be a complete IBM solution that you built. It could be something that only relies on cloud and database, HTTP accessible data store. It could be just a runtime, a Node.js runtime, a simple web application, some of push services, cloud functions, or it can use some really top-end stuff. If you did want to splurge any money on some of the advanced stuff, you could use the full blockchain platform. You could use the enterprise databases. That's totally up to you, but you don't have to spend anything to participate and use those services. In fact, last year's winners, many of them used just their free light accounts and they won the competition. So there's no obligation to pay anything. Just use your free account if that's what you want to do. Again, you'll submit the email addresses and your teammates as well, so we can correlate and enforce the rule of folks being only on one team and ensuring that they're only associated with one project, one submission. The form doesn't require you to log into it, so you can't come back and edit your submission later. But what you can do is just come back to this page, copy back in the information from your previous submission. So you will get a confirmation email. You can copy from that, update it, and then just fill out the form again if you want to. I highly recommend, though, just creating a text file, a Word document, a plain file. writing out all of your answers to these questions, and then just using that, saving that to your local computer, and then just copying in that information later. It's just sometimes easier than working with a form all in one session. Yeah, so we'll take the latest submission. So even if you submit today and decide you want to change something over the weekend, you can do that as well. We'll take the last entry from your email address as the final submission. So keep in mind, make sure they're consistent. If you had stuff in earlier versions you want to bring back over into your latest version, make sure you include that as well. Okay. So yeah, you just fill out the form. There's a couple of questions, legal questions up front. So number one is accepting the data privacy policy. So David Clark Cause is the owner of Call for Code, the global initiative that IBM is in partnership with. So they own the privacy policy. You can check that out at callforcode.org. You accept that if you agree with it. You'll also have the link to the participation agreement. And again, a link for your teammates to also accept the participation agreement. Provide your submission name or your project name, your team name, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, sure, I'll use the pre-filled one, my friend Sherry. Include your team's descriptions. So here's just one that I've written in one of my test version earlier. Just describes, just a simple one-liner of what your solution does. Enter, about 500 words. There's no form validation for length on this. So for example, if I did, just grab some text from this is a great place to get just generated dummy text. So this is about a page of text, right? So 5 paragraphs. We'll take that, put that in there. You can see it uses line breaks and things like that. You may be able to do some rich text on it as well. So if you want to make something bold, no, actually does not take rich text. So if you do have some rich text, put that in your repo. Okay, we got that. Solution roadmap, you can upload a PDF or a file. And I'll show you Project Owls. They're in their public GitHub repository. You can still see it, what they had submitted with their project. So it was a great little diagram they put together. It described where they were at the submission date last year. And because they had a 2-part solution, they had the software and the hardware. It described the dates, kind of milestones for each part, where they wanted to go after so here's basically what they built until the competition, and this is what they wanted to do afterwards. So just a simple diagram like this is effective. It's just got a limit of 10 megabytes. And again, if you have something else in more detail, include it in the GitHub repository. Okay. Okay. Oops, well, not okay. You can link to your GitHub repository here. You can also link to a organization, a GitHub organization. So for example, at Project Owl, they had several repos underneath their main organization. So you can provide just the GitHub repo itself or the organization name. A link to a video. So again, an unlisted YouTube video is probably the best solution. You can give us a public one as well, one that's already opened up that you've shared with other people. You can use Vimeo. You can point directly to just an MP4 file, whatever you need. Just make sure this is no longer than 3 minutes. And again, you can have additional videos on there on your GitHub repo. IBM Cloud Services, so CloudInt, IBM Cloud Functions, and just comma separate the list. Put in your full name as the person creating the application, your email address, and pick the region you come from. We had participation from 156 nations last year. We want to see participation from lots of different places again this year as well. So, grab one. If you don't see yours, this comes from an ISO standard. So it's not something that we just arbitrarily picked to recognize the separation of states and nations and countries. It is something that, whatever you self-identify with, even if you're in the U.S. and you want to recognize yourself as Puerto Rico, you can do that. And you can also just list other. Your affiliation. So you can, obviously employees of IBM are not eligible for the competition, nor are those from David Clark Cause or Angel Hack. This is an optional field, but if you represent a university, if you represent a company, you're in yourself as a startup, any other affiliation you want to put in there, it's kind of free form. And again, it's optional. And then list your teammates' email addresses. So you can have up to 4 other teammates for a total team size of 5. Enter their addresses in here. Teammate 3 and teammate 4 and teammate 5. And those are optional too. You can be a team of 1 if you want to, but some of the best submissions we saw last year came from cross-functional teams. So teams that consisted of maybe a developer, a database expert, a designer, a business analyst, a first responder, for example, things like that. So I do encourage you, to think about if there's anybody that you really would like to have join your team, in particular, somebody that can help put together a submission package. Is very much encouraged. Okay, and that's it. Once you submit that, you'll get a confirmation email that'll contain all the information you filled out. Again, if you want to resubmit it later, change anything, do that, and copy in the other information you had. You can't log back in and edit this directly. Just create a new submission, and that's it. And again, for your teammates, they just need to accept the participation agreement. Which is a matter of going through the 2 accepts, really, and providing their email address to match up with your submission, and then listing their country and organizational affiliation. And that's it for them. Okay, so let me share some other examples of good documentation of projects. So again, Project L, now that they've won the competition, they've been working on their application. You can kind of see, they've expanded out from which was just a single repo at one point out to a larger community of other applications. You don't have to split your repo, but you can, for example, if you had one that was totally documentation, one that was totally code, things like that. You don't necessarily need to include things like contributing documentation. You don't necessarily have to set it up for continuous delivery, for example, through Travis. That does nightly builds on check-in or builds on check-ins. These are all good things to have, but again, nothing that you really necessarily need. In fact, one of the bare minimum, there's a bare minimum template in the call for code itself organization. It's called a project sample. So if you scroll down, if you clone this and use this as your starting point, it's a pretty good way to document your code. Project title, description of what you've done. If you've got translation files, include those. If you have another website that's something for your end users of your system, your prereq, how it can be installed and tested by the judges, and some of the the dependent services that you run on, and things like that. And this particular template is actually based on some work that Billy Thompson had done. She had a great list of templates that you can use, best practices for documenting your repository. And this includes also the Apache 2 license. So if you win, that's the license that your code is going to be under. You have full control of the IP. You can put stuff in other repos that aren't public, but whatever you submit needs to be available and usable by the judges. And if you do win, this is what's going to be used as making sure that you can build a business around it, that it can be used by people. The core of it can be used by people as well and benefit from it. Okay. Yeah, each file, if you're using Apache 2, also requires you to add a license header. Pretty easy to do in each file. You don't need to do it at sufficient time, but it's something that's good to have. Okay. So that's the GitHub repository. Let me point you to a pretty cool one that just came in through the IBM internal competition, which ended last month. IBMers aren't eligible for the public call for code global competition, so we had our own separate competition. And one of the ones that we're judging right now actually is a pretty cool solution. It's an IoT solution, but they had a really nicely documented um, uh, repository. Nothing too complex, right? So there's no like automated builds in here. It has a couple of sources for their tests and their source code, their images, the web application. But they did great by including their demo video as well embedded in their repo. They talked about its architecture diagram, what it depends on, what is core to it itself. So in this case, it's this and this sensor. They described how it works, the workflow, screenshots, um, where they're going with the solution, what they want to do to it. And again, did a really good job about calling out the services, a mock test that judges use, things like that. So again, consider, really, this is really your hook to the non-technical judges as well, even though it's in your source code repo. Getting that broad appeal that people can understand and judge your solution very clearly and see the value. Okay. And demo videos. So one of the really cool videos that came from the second place winner last year was this one from PD3R. So they had a visual recognition system. So if you can, we'll link to this later.
In the weeks and months.
But it really talked, really explained the problem they were trying to solve. Provided a little bit of an animation in here. Showed kind of how their visual recognition model was trained, what it looked for, and then how that could be used from their application. In this case, their solution was about taking a picture of a damaged building and understanding whether it could be rebuilt, retrofit, or if it had to be torn down, all of which helped them prioritize resources for getting people back in their homes quicker. So, so this is a great little video. 2 minutes and 59 seconds, right in under the wire. It was great. Talked about the end users of the system and things like that. So this is a really good example of a good video that's going to be hit with the judges. Okay. So yeah, the .org site, submission site. All right, let me pop back over to the slides. So again, the key rules, what you build, what you claim as your submission has to be original and have been built after February 12th, which is when we announced the competition, and built until and complete on July 29th. Now, the repo itself can, if it has, for example, nightly builds, those can continue to run after the submission deadline. If you have security fixes, for example, to your node modules, you can do those changes. You can do small documentation updates, such as fixing typos, but you can't do anything substantial to your code to change its functionality after the deadline. Again, we're living in a world with continuous delivery, updated security requirements, updated dependencies. We expect all those things are going to be as part of your solution. Just don't make any substantial changes. You can compete alone or up to 5 participants. Everybody has to be over the age of 18, and you can only be on one team. So if you've been working on a couple of different ideas, different groups, kind of working through the thing you want to build, make it clear to your teammates what team you're going to be part of. So if they don't list you as part of their team, disqualify you. And make sure you're on one and only team. And if you have withdrawn from another team, make sure that team lead knows so they can update their submission if they already submitted and added your name. You have to list one or more of the IBM cloud services. Again, there's over 200 options: web applications, mobile applications, machine learning, blockchain, IoT, whatever you want, and combine it with hybrid, multi-cloud, external services, external data sets. Those dependencies obviously are not going to be considered part of your submission, and we know that applications aren't just living in a vacuum. But just call out, what you're using, what's your core application, what's your innovation relative to the dependencies it has. Again, submission form is available. Check it out and submit. Even get your idea in there right now. And maybe, if it's got references to the video, well, with YouTube you can update the video after the fact. But the repo, if you link it in there, you can continue to iterate in the repo until the deadline without having to update the submission itself. things like that. So, fill it out, get familiar with the submission process so you don't wait to the last possible minute, and then feel free to just keep iterating doing that. So now I'll move over to 5 tips, and then I can take some questions, see if people have any specific information that they're looking for. But again, we're looking for what sets Call for Code apart from other hackathons and Tech for Good is it's not just a competition for people to learn about some technology, come up with a cool solution over a weekend, and then win a competition, and that's it. That is not what Call for Code is. What we want is ideas and code submitted that addresses real world problems, that has real potential, and is something that can be supported over the long term to make a real difference in the world. So we want to see real code that's well thought out, that considers the real world problems, that's informed by problems that have been identified by the United Nations, by local government officials, by people around the world who have suffered natural disasters, know what works, what didn't work, what they wish they did have, what they did not need, things like that. So we've got a bunch of tech talks from subject matter experts you can look at that talk to the real needs that happen preparing for responding to disasters. So look at that, cite it if you can, specific figures and facts, and make sure that your application points to how it might integrate with something that already exists. For example, there's a bunch of dashboards already in use by 911 boards. There's industry standard solutions, things like that. So make sure that you've kind of understood the landscape of what you're building for. And related to that, there are lots of shoulders you can stand on. So you don't want to reinvent the wheel with something that's not as good as a wheel, or a flat tire, for example. So make sure you look at the existing tools that are out there, look at the data sets, look at APIs you can leverage, focus on what's unique about your solution, and make that very clear what you're doing differently. Don't reinvent a standard for information exchange. There's already an XML standard that's starting to rise in adoption called the Emergency Data Exchange Language. If you build an SDK or an API for that, I know that Oasis is looking for sample code for that. That would be great to work on their experience, work on all the work they've done, and create something that's going to add value to what has already been built. Okay, and obviously, what should be clear is, we're not just looking for applications that are fantastic, that are awesome, but they need to be well documented so that the judges can immediately see the value of them, separate it from other competitors, and again, with the non-competitive folks from, for example, the Red Cross, if they're looking at this, they need to know what the technical innovation is, why it matters to them. So you can do that all with your README file, as you saw in that other repo example. You can do that in your video. Use all the tools at your disposal in the submission form to get this across. The video, this is, again, probably the first thing that a lot of judges go look at, even before they read the 500-word description. They see the title, they scan the description, and they go straight to the video. Because this really captures in a nutshell, in a 3-minute, easily digestible chunk, what your application is all about, why it makes a difference, and what makes it totally unique. So invest some time here. Maybe just assign one of your team members to be the person that does this for the next few days, while the rest of the team is working on the quality of the solution itself, working on documentation. If you have one team member or a friend or something that can help you create this video, they don't even need to be on your team, but if you need someone to help do this, there's a lot of also video templates already out there you can reuse. Go look at some of the examples on callforcode.org of the other submissions that had been created, and get some inspiration from those. And of course, for the judges to actually look at anything that you provide, the 2 big permissions issues we saw last year, and we saw even at our internal competition this year, is just making sure that whatever you share, the links, the judges can get access to them. They can kind of figure out what's going on from your description, but there's no way they're going to rate your code complete or really understand what it does if they can't get a feel for what the demo video is, what existing code exists out there. With GitHub repositories, you can ideally submit the thing just as a public repository. If you flip the switch on the night of July 29th, having provided just the link before, keeping it private until the deadline is passed, that's okay. Just make sure as soon as midnight comes on Pacific time, July 29th, you've turned it to public. You can do that. And if it is still private, if you're still a little bit concerned, after the deadline, no one's going to be able to leverage your stuff and use it in their own submission. But if you really need to keep it private, there is a handle, as a GitHub handle called Call for Code Judges that you can invite as an outside collaborator. So if you go to github.com/call-for-code, you can see this handle is part of that repository. That may not be public, but Call for Code Judges. Let's see here. Yep. So this is the handle. Invite this ID. The judges will all have access to this. So in your repository itself, if you go to one of your repositories, under the settings, I don't see it here because I'm not logged in with my incognito window, but you'll see settings, and there's a feature called Outside Collaborator. So add that to your private repo, and that they'll have read access to your solution. Okay. And if you have any passwords, particularly for the video, include that in early on in your documentation in the submission itself so that the judges can see that. Okay. So again, if you haven't already, get your IBM Cloud account, join the community, learn about the rules and the schedule and things like that. Build your application, look at any sort of pieces that you can still include in your application, code patterns, starter kits, things like that. If you have any other questions, you can ping people on Slack. So callforcode.org/Slack. There's an inviter there. Ask in the general channel, ask in any of the specific channels you're interested in finding out information about. We're all in there, IBM mentors and others. And then, submit your solution, iterate on what you have. And that is how it will be entered in the competition. Okay, so with that, let me ask Mike, who's been hosting the live stream for us here, if there was any questions that came in over the chat. Great question. Right. And that leads to actually another answer that I can provide for it too. So you don't have to list everything you use, just the high level pieces, what composes your application, whether it's in the architecture diagram itself or in the list of services. At least list one or more in there. The judges can kind of figure out maybe what's going on. And to the second part of the question, so as you're working on your solution, you're obviously going to have your own instances of databases with your own credentials. You're going to have some other services that are specific to what's running on your computer. And that's okay. The judges do not need your credentials to your services. What they'll want to see in the repo, though, is enough documentation that explains to them how they could set up a version of your application of their own. So that would just say, okay, whoever's reading this repo, go create a Watson Studio instance, take these images and upload them to the custom model, and then you can test from there. Or create a web application. Here's a manifest for it, or Cloud Foundry manifest, a Kubernetes manifest. Just describe how a person would be able to recreate your solution. And even if the judges don't go ahead and do that, they'll understand the steps you took to create your solution and how it could be used by someone in the open source world if they were to come to a fully complete documented repository. So again, don't include any credentials in your repo itself. Don't share those in the judge form except for access to videos and stuff like that. But your application itself, you don't need to include You can include like the data structure, like your whatever describes your database. You don't need to include the database that goes in your database, um, unless it's just sample data that is required. As for example, if you got a relational database that has a fixed list of data structures in it, categories, stuff like that, you can put that in your SQL file. But you don't have to include any proprietary data. You don't have to replicate exactly what you're running demos using. Just enough to document how someone could replicate it. Okay. Okay, cool. All right. So with that, let me see if there are any other things that I might have forgotten here. Let's see. And just go to the code. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So keep an eye too on this challenge page. The judges, we are going to be publicizing more and more names of judges out there. It'll go through several rounds of judging. As I mentioned, these are the top level judges. We're going to have more in here as well. So whatever you submit is going to be evaluated by heads of top NGO agencies, eminent technologists, eminent folks that have an interest in a particular cause area. There are some, for example, celebrity supporters that are also deeply involved in natural disaster preparedness. Obviously, may not be all of these people, but someone like a Matt Damon, for example, is very associated with clean water. There are people that are in this list that may be judges as well. And again, we're going to have lots of people that are going to be judging the applications to make sure that each is thoroughly assessed. Again, this is why we don't have a white list of judges' names to give you. Yeah, check out everything else that's in here. Again, there's more resources that you can find. And make sure you take advantage of the resources that are available to you on the IBM Cloud. There's obviously the catalog itself, cloud.ibm.com/catalog. That lists everything that you can use. If you want to just look for the free stuff, just filter by light. That includes all the AI stuff. If you are interested in the sample code that you can work with, there's a bunch of things called code patterns. So on the developer.ibm.com/call-for-code site, you can find all of the materials available to you in either solution starter kits, which are things that we created in partnership with the United Nations to identify a real world problem and one potential solution to that problem. There's technologies listed by tech area, by industry area, by disaster type. So do explore those. If you're doing any last minute development, see if there's something cool you can maybe integrate with what you have already. And again, try to make sure you check out the channel description itself as much as possible. Great question. So we don't have any fit. Yeah. Okay. So the great question is any information on the winners announcement, when and where. So if you go to callforcode.org, back to that challenge page, there is a schedule on there. So if we scroll down to it, it shows, so final submission. Okay. The initial rounds of judging are going to happen throughout August. So this starts with basic checks about making sure it's original code, that's fresh code that was written for this competition. It goes in there and makes sure there's at least one cloud service. It then goes through a deep tech dive with some folks within IBM and some of our partners. It then goes through an NGO deep dive and assessment and scoring. So the code having been tested, it then goes to see how effective the solution is, for example. And then that round selects the semifinalists. There's no fixed number of semifinalists, and there may not be an announcement of the semifinalists. We did it last year. We may do it again. And then the final round of judges will select the winner from the the 5 overall finalists that expert judge panel picked up. So they will ultimately choose which one in their assessment is going to have the greatest impact and can be scaled around the world. So the winners themselves, the finalists will be announced early September in time for the TechCrunch event in September. The winners themselves will be announced on October 12th, Saturday, at the United Nations in New York City. There's a room there that overlooks the East River, if you're familiar with where the United Nations is. So we have the Delegates Dining Room in New York. The first, second, and third winners will be invited. Each of those teams will be invited to the event. Their travel expenses will be paid, and the winner of the 3 will be announced. The 4th and 5th runners up will have known earlier, and they'll be invited, but travel will not be covered. I can share them. We can send some of those out. I know I'm going to post them in the Slack channel. We can get them into the Influitive community. There is not a single page for them right now, particularly this one repo example. This is inside the IBM firewall. This is just an IBM internal submission that looked really cool. I can't share this one, but if you go to this, I don't know, Mike, if you are able to paste into the chat these URLs. Okay, so yeah, this is github.com/project-owl. There's also the, actually I can just paste these into the chat, the Zoom chat. 1 second here. Chat, so, actually, you can use the whole repo there, Mike, the whole organization. This is the PD3R video. This is the sample repo. Okay, great. Okay, yeah, and so then you'll see the information too from this one here. So github.com/call-for-code. And we can include it too in the replay links that we send on YouTube. We'll include those. And of course, the starters, you can find everything through developer.ibm.com/call-for-code. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Well, we're at the top of the hour, so that makes a nice conclusion. So again, join the community if you haven't already. There is if you go to developer.ibm.com/call-for-code, by joining the community or accepting the challenge, you get signed up for the IBM Cloud account and you get dropped into the IBM Coder community. You can also find out the information to join Slack through there. You can also just hit callforcode.org/Slack, and that'll invite you to the Slack workspace. You can reach out to any of the IBM mentors there with any questions you have beyond what you have here at this talk. And again, go ahead and submit your solution, even if you're not necessarily comfortable. At least you'll get an entry in the system. And then if you do have a chance to update it, feel free to submit again. All righty. With that, best of luck, everybody. We're really looking forward to seeing what you built. And I'm very excited to see what the judges find and what is able to be deployed in an area of greatest need early next year. All right. Thank you very much.